Hi, I'm Rena Chinn. Welcome to Psyched with Rena. Today's episode is going to be on how to find a therapist. During this COVID season, many of us are finding more anxiety and depression due to the very unusual and restraining circumstances. But first, let me introduce myself. I'm Rena Chinn. I'm a psychotherapist in Seattle area, and I work primarily with Asian Americans and other people of color. And in this episode, I'm going to give you kind of step-by-step things to do if you are looking for a therapist for yourself. Maybe this is the first time you're seeking therapy, so there's a few things I want you to keep in mind and evaluate before you pick up the phone. Before I get into the tactical tips of finding a therapist, I want to acknowledge that seeking therapy is a very brave move to try to work on and change to be a better version of yourself. And I want to acknowledge that the best fit between a client and therapist is the one where you have the best relationship with them. So as you are talking to people, try to evaluate how you feel when you're talking to them and how you feel afterwards. That will be the best determinant of a successful team in working together. So before I get into the nuts and bolts of finding a good therapist, I want you to trust yourself and trust your perceptions of the people you're talking to. First of all, the best way to begin is to gather a list of resources to figure out who you want to approach. You could do this by asking friends who have a therapist that they like. You can also access your insurance that has a list of covered providers, and you can Google Psychology Today or other search engines directories. There you can sort on therapists by your interests, by your location, by your insurance. So first thing is gather up your resources and figure out where you're going to look to find a therapist. The next thing I'd like you to consider are what are your goals for therapy? If you have particular goals, maybe you want to list them out, X, Y, and Z. I want to be better able to represent myself at work. I want to figure out why I have this repetitive pattern that keeps happening. I want to figure out why I tick like this. I keep making this mistake even though I don't want to. These are examples of goals, and I want you to write out your goals and also think through how will you know if or when your goals are met. Now, some goals may seem like they're present or current, but they may lead to deeper historical patterns. I have a client, Jen, who has trouble standing up to her bosses, who often feels very intimidated by them. So much of the work we've done is working with her family of origin, the background that has led her to be so afraid to stand up to authority figures. But even so, it's good to figure out what your immediate goals are before approaching a therapist. The third thing I'd like you to consider is what approaches work best for you, or what approaches are you looking for? You don't need to know the psychological modalities to get this. Do you want someone who can meet your immediate pressing needs, or do you want to look at the underlying emotions and patterns that have caused them? Do you want someone who can work with your body and internalized issues, or do you want someone who will give you homework sheets to work on at home between sessions? These represent different approaches to therapy, so you might think through what has worked best for you before or what you think you might prefer. Before talking to a therapist, it's also helpful to identify what competencies you want in a therapist. Now, all therapists are supposed to have multicultural training and be culturally competent. However, you may want someone who particularly understands your family background, your family's culture. There can also be other aspects you might want competence in, understanding your religious or spiritual beliefs, understanding your gender identities or sexual orientation, having experience with polyamory. These are all just examples of areas of competence, and you'd want to make sure you could identify what areas are important to you when you're talking to a therapist, and then you can ask what experience they have in this area. Now, I want to clarify that because they have competencies in this area, that does not necessarily mean they have a similar life experience. For example, I work with a lot of adoptees from Asia who've grown up with white families. That is not my personal background, but because I've had a lot of experience working with these types of clients, I feel like I'm fairly competent in working with them. Another example might be, let's say you're in the military and you'd want someone who is familiar working with veterans. However, that does not necessarily mean they need to be a veteran themselves. Just food for thought. So you have a list of therapists, you have an idea of your goals, you have a sense of what kind of approach you're looking for and what kind of background they need to have. The last factor would be logistics. Think through the logistics of financially, how much can you afford to pay? Do you need someone in network with your insurance? I'll let you know that many fully licensed therapists are covered out of network of insurances. So your insurance may reimburse you for part of the fee, even if they are not in the insurance network, but they are a very good fit. So think about finances, also location, although during COVID, many of us are online until the end of the year. And also think about timing, whether your work requires a different schedule. Sometimes if I work with people who are overseas in Asia, we have to sync it just right to match up the 16-hour time difference. And that limits the availability. Anyway, I hope this gives you some good tips. If you'd like to hear more from me, please subscribe to the channel and ring the bell for further notifications, and you'll be getting more tips on coping skills and strategies. So this is Rena Chinn with Psyched with Rena. Thanks for tuning in. Bye-bye.